What happens when the one deemed too broken to matter becomes the only one who can save them all? For Isla Morwen, life had been an exercise in enduring. Born an Omega to the Frostpeak pack during the harshest winter in living memory, she'd survived when 3 other pups born that night had not. Her parents said it was a miracle, but the pack whispered it was a curse. Something about her had always been different. Too quiet, too gentle, her wolf too deeply buried. The scent of lavender and morning dew and wildflowers clung to her like a ghost of spring in their perpetual winter, and the other wolves treated her as if she were made of glass. Fragile, forgettable. A wolf who would never amount to anything more than a shadow in the corners of pack life. But when Alpha King Asher Stormridge stood before the winter solstice gathering and rejected her as his fated mate, declaring her too weak to stand beside a king who ruled with iron and ice, everything changes. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. The winter solstice gathering was the most important night in the Northern Territories. It was the longest night of the year, when darkness claimed the world for 16 hours, and the cold bit deep enough to kill. It was the night when the moon goddess was said to be closest to the mortal realm, when mate bonds were most likely to form, when prophecies awakened and destinies were revealed. Isla had attended 18 winter solstice gatherings in her 21 years of life, always from the back of the crowd, always in borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. This year was no different. She wore a simple gray dress, her dark blonde hair braided simply, the silver collar marking her as unmated, sitting cold against her throat. Her parents had been unusually tense all week. Her mother, Senna, kept touching Isla's face as if memorizing it, her scent of warm bread and herbs thick with an anxiety she wouldn't explain. Her father, Bryn, had spent hours in his workshop, emerging only to look at Isla with eyes that held too much grief for a man whose daughter was healthy and alive. "Are you feeling all right?" Isla had asked him the night before. "I will be," he'd said, which wasn't really an answer. "No matter what happens tomorrow night, remember that we love you, that everything we did to protect you." Isla hadn't understood. She still didn't. The gathering was held in the Great Circle, an enormous amphitheater carved from ice and stone that had stood for 1,000 years. Wolves from all 6 packs under Asher Stormridge's rule filled the space, hundreds of them, their combined scents and power making the air feel thick and charged. Alpha King Asher Stormridge arrived precisely at sunset, and the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. He was a force of nature, made flesh, 6.5 feet of raw dominance wrapped in black fur and leather. His scent rolled over the crowd like a physical wave. Dark forest and dying embers and ozone and cold steel, the smell of winter storms and battlefields and absolute authority. At 32, he'd held his throne for 7 years, and in that time, he had crushed 3 separate rebellions and expanded his territory to twice its original size. He was also, by all accounts, utterly merciless. They called him the Winter King because his heart was said to be as cold as the ice that covered their lands. He'd never taken a mate, never shown interest in taking one, and the few wolves brave enough to seek his favor had been dismissed with brutal efficiency. Isla had seen him only twice before, always from a distance. Up close, he was terrifying. His eyes were pale gray, like ice over deep water, and scars marked his face and hands, the largest running from his right eyebrow down to his jaw. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing features that were handsome in a harsh, unforgiving way. The ceremony began with the traditional offerings to the moon goddess. Then came the mate-bonding ritual, where unmated wolves entered the circle to see if the goddess had chosen any pairs. Isla stayed in the back. She always did. She had no expectation of finding a mate. What wolf would want someone as weak as her? She attended only because absence would be noted, would be seen as disrespect. Then Asher's pale gray eyes found her across the crowd. The bond snapped into place with the force of an avalanche. Golden light blazed between them, so bright it lit the entire amphitheater like a second sun. Isla felt it wrap around her heart, sink into her bones, claim every part of her with the absolute certainty of divine will. The pain dropped her to her knees. Not the pain of the bond itself, that was almost sweet, like coming home after a long journey. but the pain of her wolf suddenly surging against whatever had kept her buried for 21 years, trying to answer the call of her mate. Through the golden light, Isla saw Asher go rigid, his face drained of all color, then flushed dark with fury. His scent turned sharp with rage and something else, something that tasted like old fear and bitter determination. "No," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden stunned silence. "Absolutely not." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. An Alpha King's fated mate was a gift from the goddess herself, a sacred bond that would strengthen his rule and his line. To reject such a bond was almost unheard of. One of his advisors, a grizzled beta named Tormod, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the bond is clear. The moon goddess has spoken." "Then the moon goddess is mistaken." Asher descended from the raised platform, each step measured and deadly. Wolves scattered out of his path like leaves before a storm. "Look at her. She's barely wolf at all. She has no strength, no presence, no power. She would be a liability." Each word was a blade between Isla's ribs. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate, still shaking from the bond's formation and her wolf's desperate attempts to break free. "Asher, please," her father said, stepping forward with his hands raised in supplication. "You don't understand. She's not what she seems. If you would just—" "I understand perfectly, Bryn Morwen. Your daughter is weak, and I will not shackle myself to weakness, no matter what the goddess decrees." Asher stopped directly in front of Isla, towering over her kneeling form. This close, she could see the absolute conviction in his pale eyes. "Some bonds are mistakes. Some destinies are curses waiting to happen." Behind him, a woman laughed. Vivian Ashcroft, a high-ranking beta from the Ironcliff pack, stepped forward. She was stunning, tall and graceful, with copper hair that fell in waves and eyes like poisoned emeralds. Her scent of cinnamon and iron and fresh blood made Isla's stomach turn. "Poor little Omega," Vivian purred, her hand settling possessively on Asher's arm. "Did you really think you could stand beside a king?" Asher didn't remove her hand, didn't step away. He just looked down at Isla with those cold, cold eyes. "I, Asher Stormridge, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, reject you, Isla Morwen, as my fated mate." His voice was formal, ritualistic, final. "I sever this bond in the sight of the moon goddess and the assembled packs. You are released from all claims, all rights, all protections afforded by mate bond law." "Wait!" Isla managed to gasp, reaching for him even as the first wave of true pain hit. "I don't—" The rejection completed with the force of a thunderclap. The golden bond between them didn't just break, it shattered, exploding into 1,000 pieces of light and agony. Isla's scream tore from her throat as the mystical connection was violently severed. It felt like her soul was being ripped apart, like everything good and warm inside her was being burned away by ice and fury. She convulsed, her body trying to reject what was happening, her wolf howling in grief and rage deep inside where no one could hear. Guards appeared, massive warriors in Asher's black and silver colors. They lifted Isla from the ground, even though she couldn't feel her legs, couldn't feel anything except the gaping wound in her chest where the bond had been. "Remove her," Asher ordered, already turning away as if she meant nothing, had never meant anything. "Beyond the borders, immediately." "Your Majesty, the storm," someone protested. "It's the solstice, the longest night. She'll freeze before dawn." Then perhaps she should have been born stronger. Asher's voice was flat, emotionless. He made a mistake. He didn't just reject his mate, he sentenced her to death and felt nothing. Isla's mother was crying, great heaving sobs that filled the air with the scent of her grief. But she didn't move forward, didn't protest, just stood there with her hands pressed to her mouth. Her father looked stricken, years older than he had that morning. "Forgive us," he whispered as the guards dragged Isla past. "Forgive us for what we did." But Isla didn't understand what there was to forgive. The guards took her to the northernmost gate, where cultivated land gave way to the deep wild, untamed forest that stretched for hundreds of miles, where winter was eternal and the cold could kill in minutes. They released her just beyond the marker stones, and one of them, younger than the others, his face troubled, pressed a fur cloak into her hands. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I truly am." Then they were gone, and Isla was alone in the dark. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, driven by winds that howled like wounded beasts. The temperature plummeted. Isla stumbled forward because stopping meant dying, wrapping the fur cloak tight around her shaking body. The bond wound in her chest throbbed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of what she'd lost, or what she'd never really had. Her wolf, that presence that had always been too distant, too quiet, stirred with rage and grief. "Why?" Isla asked her silently. "Why did he reject us? What's wrong with us?" Her wolf's response was faint but fierce. "Nothing. Nothing is wrong with us. They are the ones who are broken." Isla didn't have the strength to argue. She found shelter in a cave, shallow and exposed to the elements, but better than nothing. Ice already coated the walls and the wind cut through even the thick fur cloak. Isla huddled in the deepest corner, trying to preserve what little body heat she had left. Her thoughts drifted as hypothermia began to set in. She thought about her parents' strange behavior, about her father's cryptic words. "Everything we did to protect you." She thought about Asher's cold gray eyes, about the way he'd looked at her like she was nothing, less than nothing. She thought about Vivian's cruel laugh. And she thought about the old stories her grandmother used to tell before she died when Isla was 7. Stories about the soul weaver, a wolf born once in a generation who could mend what was broken and heal what was dying. A wolf whose power was so great that others would fear it, try to suppress it, try to destroy it before it could bloom. When winter's grip is tightest and hope itself lies frozen, the soul weaver shall wake from the deepest slumber. Born in sorrow, tempered in betrayal, she will rise when even the strong have fallen. Her heart will mend what cruelty has shattered. Her hands will warm the coldest night, and in her light the dead winter will finally break. Just a story. A fairy tale. This is it, Isla thought as her eyes grew heavy. This is how I die, alone in the dark, rejected and forgotten? No, her wolf whispered with sudden strength. This is where we wake up. Then darkness claimed her, and Isla knew nothing at all. Warmth. That was the first thing Isla registered as consciousness slowly, painfully returned. Not the warmth of fire, but the warmth of living things, breath and heartbeats and bodies pressed close in the dark. She forced her eyes open and couldn't immediately process what she was seeing. Wolves. Massive wolves, each one easily 3 times the size of the largest alpha she'd ever encountered, surrounded her in a protective circle. Their combined body heat had created a pocket of warmth that had literally saved her life. Isla counted them through her confused haze, her hypothermic brain struggling to make sense of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 enormous wolves with fur in every color imaginable. Midnight black, pure white, russet red, silver gray, golden brown. Their eyes, when they turned to look at her, glowed with supernatural light, gold and blue and green and violet, colors that shouldn't exist but did. The scent of aged oak and winter snow and pine and approaching storms filled the cave, mixing with 9 other distinct signatures, smoke and copper, rain and stone, fire and honey, and more. Together they created a symphony of power that made her head spin and her wolf surge with recognition. The largest wolf, the one whose oak and snow scent dominated, raised his massive head. His eyes were ice blue, ancient and patient and infinitely kind. "We've been waiting for you," a voice said directly into her mind, deep and warm and steady as mountains. Isla's breath caught. "Who? What are you?" The wolf rose and the shift was poetry. One moment, massive wolf. The next, man. He was perhaps 40, with dark hair heavily streaked with silver and a full beard. Scars marked every visible inch of him, his face, his bare chest, his arms, each one telling a story of survival. Despite the freezing temperature, he seemed unbothered by his nakedness. "My name is Stellan Blackwood," he said, his voice matching the one from her mind. "I lead the Starsworn, the 10 guardians bound by prophecy to serve the Soul Weaver." His ice-blue eyes held hers with gentle certainty. "We serve you." "You have the wrong person." Isla tried to sit up and nearly passed out from the effort. "I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega who wasn't wanted. Asher Stormridge is a fool who doesn't recognize salvation when it's offered to him." Stellan settled onto the cold stone as if it were a comfortable chair. Immediately, one of the other wolves, a beautiful female with pure white fur, shifted and draped a warm cloak over his shoulders, then wrapped a second around Isla. The female was stunning, with platinum blonde hair and warm golden eyes. "I'm Kaya," she said gently, her scent of honey and rain comforting. "And you need to listen to what Stellan has to say, because your life, all our lives, depend on it." "You are the Soul Weaver," Stellan said simply. "Born during the harshest winter in living memory, you survived when others didn't, because your power protected you even as an infant. But that power terrified your parents. They feared what you were meant to become. So they did something unforgivable." Isla's heart was pounding. "What did they do?" "They bound your power, used old magic, dark and costly, to suppress your wolf and lock away your abilities. The ritual required sacrifices, pieces of their own souls, their own strength. They've been paying that price for 21 years, slowly diminishing themselves to keep you hidden." "But why?" "Because the prophecy says the Soul Weaver will save the world," said another wolf who'd shifted, a lean man with copper skin and eyes that swirled with colors. He had the build of a runner and moved with liquid grace. "I'm Kalen, and your parents didn't want you to be a savior. They wanted you to be their daughter, safe, hidden, small. The binding magic they used was tied to your life force and your pack bonds," Stellan continued. "As long as you remained part of Frost Peak Pack, as long as no mate bond formed, the binding held. But when Asher rejected you, when he severed the mate bond with such violence, he shattered the binding magic as well." As if his words were a catalyst, Isla felt something move inside her chest, not the bond wound, though that still ached dully. Something else, something vast and warm and utterly, completely hers. Her wolf stirred. "Hello, Isla," the voice said, clear and strong and filled with love. "I've been trying to reach you for so long." Tears burned Isla's eyes. "I can hear you. I can finally hear you." "Your power is waking," Kaya said gently. "Soon you'll remember things you never knew you'd forgotten. Your wolf will show you who you truly are." And she did. Memories flooded back, not from Isla's life, but from her wolf's awareness. Moments when Isla had healed a cut with a touch and thought it was just quick clotting. Times when a sad packmate had felt better after talking to her, their pain easing in ways they couldn't explain. Instances when plants grew stronger near where she'd walked, when sick animals recovered faster in her presence. Small miracles, tiny exhibitions of power, all dismissed or attributed to luck because no one, not even Isla, had known what she was. "The prophecy speaks of healing the coldest night," Stellan said. "We've spent 7 years searching for you, following signs and omens, because the world is dying, Isla. Slowly, subtly, but dying nonetheless. Winter grows longer each year. Spring comes later. The land itself is freezing, and no one knows why." "Except we do," said another Starsworn who'd shifted, a massive man with shoulders like mountains and kind, dark eyes. "I'm Tor, and 7 years ago, something broke in the fabric of magic itself, a wound in the world that's slowly killing everything. Only a soul weaver can heal it." The shift began without warning. One moment Isla was human, fragile and small. The next, her body was changing, transforming, becoming what it was always meant to be. Her bones didn't break or snap, they flowed, reshaping themselves like water finding a new course. Power flooded through her in waves that made her skin luminescent, glowing from within. Fur emerged, not growing but unfurling, rich auburn that darkened to mahogany along her spine and lightened to cream at her chest and paws. Silver markings traced patterns through her coat that seemed to shift and move like living light. She grew and grew and grew. When the transformation completed, Isla stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life. She was enormous, larger than Stellan, larger than any alpha, massive and powerful and radiant. Energy pulsed from her in visible waves, silver and gold light that made the cave glow like dawn was breaking. Her reflection showed in a patch of ice, eyes no longer brown but glowing amber gold, the color of sunrise and healing and hope itself. "This is who we are," her wolf purred with deep satisfaction. "This is who we've always been, waiting to wake." Isla threw back her head and howled. The sound rolled through the cave, through the forest, across the frozen landscape like the promise of spring after endless winter. It shook snow from trees, warmed the air, and sent small avalanches cascading down distant mountains. The Starsworn immediately shifted and joined the howl, 10 massive voices harmonizing with hers in a declaration that the Soul Weaver had risen. When the echoes faded, Stellan shifted back to human form and knelt in the snow that had stopped falling outside. "She is the Soul Weaver," he said reverently. "She is awake." The days and weeks that followed were a blur of discovery and growth. The Starsworn had established a sanctuary deep in the deep wild, in a valley where ancient magic kept the worst of winter at bay. Hot springs bubbled from the earth, and trees grew despite the cold. It was beautiful, a small compound of sturdy buildings surrounding a central hall, all built with obvious care. "This is the Soul Weaver's haven," Stellan explained. "Built by the first of our order centuries ago, maintained by magic and hope. It's been waiting for you." Learning to control her shift was the first challenge. Unlike most wolves who could manage it after a few attempts, Isla's power was so immense that it wanted to manifest at every strong emotion. "You've been suppressed for 21 years, Kaelin explained patiently during one training session where Isla had shifted accidentally for the 3rd time in an hour. "Your power's like a river that's been dammed. Now that the dam is broken, it wants to rush free. You need to learn to direct it, not fight it." "Easy for you to say," Isla panted, struggling to return to human form. "Actually, it was just as hard for me." Kaelin's smile was kind. "I was bound too once. Different circumstances, but the principle is the same. Focus on your breath. Find your center. Remember that you control the power. It doesn't control you." Slowly, carefully, Isla found her way back to human form. She collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. The rest of the Starsworn were equally remarkable, each with their own gifts and personalities. Tor, the weapons master, gentle despite his size, who taught Isla how to use her strength without destroying what she touched. Elora, a deadly fighter with auburn hair and emerald eyes, her scent of sage and ice sharp and focused. She taught Isla how to move despite her massive wolf form. Riven and Ash, twin brothers, one dark-haired with eyes like storm clouds, one light-haired with eyes like clear water. Riven smelled of earth and shadow, Ash of wind and light. They fought as one perfect unit. Mira, wild and fierce, with bronze skin and eyes that shifted between gold and green. Her scent of wildfire and spice matched her personality, and she made Isla laugh even during the hardest training. Orin, the eldest after Stellan, with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. His scent of old leather and tobacco was comforting, and his wisdom was invaluable. And Lyria, the healer, soft-spoken and patient, whose touch could ease pain and speed recovery. Her scent of chamomile and starlight made everyone feel safe. They became her family, her true pack, not bound by blood or territory but by choice and prophecy and genuine love. But it was Stellan who became something more. It happened gradually, naturally, like spring slowly warming frozen ground. The way his hand would steady her during difficult training, the way his scent would deepen when she entered a room, the way he looked at her with an intensity that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with desire. One evening, after Isla had finally managed to hold her wolf form for 2 full hours, Stellan asked her to walk with him. They climbed to a high ridge where you could see stars reflected in the hot springs below. "You're ready," he said quietly. "Your control is solid, your power is stable. If you wanted, you could step into your role tomorrow." "But?" Isla prompted, hearing the hesitation. "But you don't have to carry this alone." He turned to face her, ice-blue eyes reflecting starlight. "I'm 61 years old, Isla. I've lived a long life, seen terrible things, led armies and buried friends. But I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." Isla's breath caught. "I know you've been hurt," he continued. "I know Asher's rejection wounded you deeply. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But I want you to know, when you are ready, if you are ready, I would be honored beyond measure to court you, to earn the right to stand beside you." This wasn't a fated bond imposed by destiny. This was choice. pure, beautiful choice. Yes, Isla whispered. I'd like that very much. His smile was like the sun breaking through winter clouds. They took it slowly, carefully building something real. Stellan courted her with old-world courtesy, bringing her flowers from the valley, sharing meals, teaching her the ancient songs of the Starsworn. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other as thoroughly as their wolves, knew each other's scents. And when they finally kissed, standing under the stars 6 weeks after they'd met, it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. But peace never lasted in the world of wolves. It started with Alora's warning. She'd been on patrol when she caught familiar scents, Frost Peak pack wolves, far beyond their normal territory. They're tracking something, she reported, her face grim. Someone, and they're not alone. I counted scents from at least 3 different packs. They know I'm alive, Isla said. It wasn't a question. More than that, Tor had been on the same patrol. They've mobilized a full war party, at least 30 wolves, maybe more. Asher is leading them personally. Of course he is. Isla felt her wolf stir with anticipation rather than fear. I'm living proof of his mistake. As long as I exist, his judgment is questioned. You're proof that he threw away a gift from the moon goddess herself, Stellan said, his voice cold with barely restrained fury. And for a king whose power rests on divine right, that's unforgivable. Vivian is with them too, Kaya added, leading the advance scouts. The beta who'd mocked Isla at her rejection. Of course. We can't fight 30 wolves, Isla started to say, though her wolf disagreed vehemently. 10, Stellan interrupted. You're not fighting. Yes, I am. Isla let her power rise, let her eyes flash gold. I'm done hiding. I'm done running. If Asher wants me dead, he can face me himself and live with the consequences. Stellan looked ready to argue, but something in her voice, command woven with absolute certainty, stopped him. Together then, he said finally, but strategically. They chose the battlefield with care, a wide frozen meadow bordered by forest, where there was no cover for ambush and sound would carry clearly. And they waited. Asher's war party arrived at dusk, 30 wolves in perfect military formation. They shifted to human form as they approached, and Isla had to admit they were impressive. Trained warriors all, confident and deadly. Asher stood at the center, as magnificent and cold as she remembered. Vivian flanked him, her beauty sharp as broken glass. Her scent of cinnamon and iron, and blood was thick with bloodlust. Isla Morwen, Asher called across the meadow. His voice was carefully controlled, but his scent betrayed conflict. Ozone and steel sharp with something that might have been doubt. You were cast out, you were told never to return. Yet here you are, alive and apparently well. I'm in neutral territory, Isla called back, pleased her voice remained steady. And I have no interest in your kingdom, Asher. Let us go in peace. Peace? Vivian laughed, cold and cruel. You're a liability, little Omega, a rejected mate who survived when she should have died. Every day you live is a day that questions His Majesty's judgment. Then the problem is his judgment, not my survival. Asher's jaw clenched. You're a reminder of weakness, of sentiment. I won't have my rule undermined by a wolf who should never have been. Should never have been? A wave of power washed over Isla, anger igniting her gift. You arrogant fool, you don't even know what you rejected, do you? I know exactly what I rejected. A weak Omega with no, I am the Soul Weaver. Isla's voice rang across the meadow, carrying a command that made every wolf present flinch. The one from your oldest prophecies, the one who was supposed to heal the wound in the world, and you rejected me because I didn't fit your image of strength. Asher went very still. That's impossible. Is it? Look around, Asher. Your winters grow longer every year. Spring comes later if it comes at all. The land is dying and you don't know why. Power crackled across her skin, silver and gold light visible even in the fading daylight. 7 years ago something broke, and only I can fix it, but you threw me away. Enough talk, Vivian snarled. She shifted mid-leap, her copper wolf hurtling toward Isla with claws extended and fangs bared. Isla met her attack with casual ease. Her shift was instant, controlled, perfect. One moment human, the next her massive wolf form, intercepting Vivian with a single swipe of her enormous paw. The beta wolf flew backward, crashing into the snow with a yelp of shock and pain. She tried to rise, but Isla was already there, standing over her with glowing amber eyes. "Stay down," Isla commanded, pushing the words directly into Vivian's mind with irresistible force. "This is your only warning." Vivian went utterly still, every instinct screaming submission to a power far greater than her own. The meadow had gone silent. "Impossible," someone whispered. But Isla wasn't finished. She threw back her head and howled, not a call for help, but a summons. And the Starsworn answered. 10 massive wolves emerged from the forest, and Asher's warriors collectively stepped back in shock. These weren't just large wolves. These were dire wolves from ancient legends, guardians of old magic, each one radiating power that made alphas feel small and insignificant. Stellan's wolf form towered over every wolf present, his storm-gray fur crackling with silver light. Tor was a mountain of golden-brown muscle. The twins moved like synchronized death. Alora's red and black wolf carried menace like a second skin. "The Starsworn," one of Asher's advisors breathed. "From the prophecies, they're real." "They're hers," Stellan rumbled, his voice carrying even in wolf form. He stood beside Isla, protective and proud. Asher stared at Isla, and for the first time since she'd known him, his cold mask cracked. His pale gray eyes moved from her massive form to the Starsworn, to Vivian still pinned beneath her paw, and finally back to Isla herself. "What have I done?" he whispered. "You rejected your destiny." Isla shifted back to human form, and Kaya immediately brought her a cloak. "You looked at me and saw only weakness. You never bothered to look deeper, to ask questions, to wonder why an Omega might survive when she shouldn't have." Understanding and horror dawned across his face. "The prophecy. The dying winter. All of it is real." "He made a mistake," Isla said, her voice carrying across the meadow to every assembled wolf. "He didn't just reject a weak mate. He rejected the one person who could save us all, and now the world pays the price for his pride." Slowly, incredibly, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories sank to his knees in the snow. "Mercy," he said, his voice breaking. "I beg mercy, for my wolves, for my kingdom. This mistake is mine alone. If there's any way to fix this, if there's anything I can do." It would be easy to refuse. Easy to let righteous anger guide her, to punish him as he'd punished her. Isla felt her wolf's hunger for justice, felt the rightness of retribution. But vengeance wasn't healing. And healing was what the world needed. "You will return to your territories," Isla said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "You will call a gathering of all the packs, and you will tell them the truth, all of it, that you rejected the Soul Weaver, that your pride has cost the world 7 years of dying winter, that you were wrong." "They'll strip me of my throne," Asher said hoarsely. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll see that even kings can make mistakes and learn from them. But that's not my concern." She let her power rise, golden light blazing from her eyes. "My concern is healing the wound in the world, and I can't do that while defending myself from you." She looked at Vivian, who'd slunk back to Asher's side. You found joy in my humiliation. You celebrated my exile." Vivian had the grace to look ashamed. I was wrong. You were cruel. You were ambitious. You thought rank gave you the right to hurt those beneath you." Isla's voice was cold. "You're stripped of your beta rank. You'll serve as an Omega in the Ironcliff Pack for 3 full years. You'll learn humility, compassion, and what it means to be powerless. If you show genuine growth, genuine change, we can reconsider your status." Vivian's face cycled through anger, denial, and finally bitter acceptance. "As you command, Soul Weaver." Isla turned back to Asher. "This territory and the 5 surrounding it are now under my protection. Any wolf who needs sanctuary, cast out, rejected, running from abuse, will find it here. Anyone who harms a wolf for being weak, anyone who casts out a packmate to die, anyone who rules through fear and cruelty, they answer to me." She paused, then added more softly, "And I will heal the wound in the world, not for you. Not because you deserve it, but because the innocent don't deserve to suffer for your mistakes. Something flickered in Asher's pale eyes, gratitude, shame, maybe even hope. Thank you, he whispered. You're far stronger than I ever imagined. I know, Isla said simply, but I'm also done proving myself to those who refuse to see. Take your wolves and go. Remember what I said, truth and justice and protection for the vulnerable. She felt Stellan's warmth as he moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. His touch was steady, grounding, everything she needed. Treat her well, Blackwood, Asher said quietly, looking at their joined hands. She deserves better than what I gave her. With every breath I take, Stellan replied, his voice a solemn vow. They watched as Asher's war party retreated, 30 wolves who'd come for a killing leaving with a story that would change everything. When they were gone, Isla finally allowed herself to tremble. Stellan caught her before she could fall, lifting her easily. You were magnificent, he murmured. I was terrifying, she corrected, but she was smiling. That too. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. What now? Now, we heal the world. In the months that followed, Isla's sanctuary grew exponentially. Word spread that the Soul Weaver had risen, and wolves began arriving from every direction. Cast out omegas, abused betas, even alphas tired of the constant battles for dominance. She built a true community where rank mattered less than character, where everyone had value regardless of designation. And slowly, carefully, she began the work of healing the wound in the world's magic. It took time, months of meditation, of channeling her power deep into the earth, of knitting together the tear that had been bleeding warmth from the world for 7 years. Stellan was with her every step, lending his strength, keeping her grounded. When they completed their chosen mate bond under the first spring moon the world had seen in 7 years, the mark that appeared over their hearts, a silver flame that never went cold, declared their choice to all who could see. Her parents came, eventually. They arrived broken by guilt, diminished by the years of maintaining the binding spell. Through tears, they confessed their fear, their terrible choice to suppress her power rather than lose her to destiny. Isla didn't forgive them immediately. Trust had to be rebuilt, but she gave them a place in her sanctuary, a chance to prove their love through action rather than control. Asher kept his word. He told the truth, faced challenges to his throne, and survived by demonstrating genuine remorse and implementing sweeping reforms. He sent regular reports, asking nothing in return, simply keeping her informed. And when the blood moon rose on the autumn equinox, waking something ancient and hungry in the deep places that even the Soul Weaver's power couldn't reach alone, Isla stood on the highest ridge with the Starsworn at her back and Stellan beside her. It's coming, Elora said quietly, her enhanced senses picking up something massive approaching from the north. I know. Isla's amber eyes scanned the crimson horizon. But this time, we're ready. Whatever it is, we face it together, Stellan said, squeezing her hand. Isla smiled, fierce and unafraid. She'd been broken and reborn. She'd been rejected and risen stronger. She'd healed the world once already. Let it come, she said, her power rising like the tide. We'll be waiting. And so Isla's journey as the Soul Weaver truly began. A journey from powerless to powerful, from rejected to revered, from a girl who believed she was broken to a woman who knew she was exactly what the world needed. She learned that true strength came not from never being wounded, but from healing those wounds and helping others do the same. She discovered that the most powerful bonds were forged not by fate, but by choice, by mutual respect, by love freely given. Her story became legend. Songs were sung about the Omega who became the Soul Weaver, about the Winter King who rejected salvation and learned humility, about the Starsworn who waited centuries for their prophesied queen. But more than legend, her story became hope. Hope for every wolf told they were too weak. Hope for every heart broken by cruelty. Hope that even the coldest night can be healed by someone brave enough to kindle their inner light. What do you think happens when the blood moon's darkness finally descends? Would you have shown Asher mercy, or would you have chosen differently? And if you could heal one wound in the world, what would it be? If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you'd want to see next. Should we explore the blood moon threat? Dive deeper into Isla and Stellan's bond? Maybe follow one of the other Starsworn's journey? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. There's so much more to discover in this world. Ancient magic, deeper prophecies, and the battles still to come. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this journey. We'll see you in the next chapter.